DLC 1 is less than a month away, and I know the community cannot contain its excitement about this map. Everybody is looking forward to it. People are gnawing at the bits to get information on DLC 1, and I decided I'd bring you guys some research that I did on the map to help hold you over as you wait and anticipate anxiously this map. We don't know much about this map except for that it's set on an island in the North Sea. That's really the best we can do in terms of story, but that does actually give us enough to start to do some research into what this map may be about and what the secret story behind this map actually is. If we go into Google Maps and we try to look at islands within the North Sea around Germany, because we'd assume we'd be playing in a map near Germany because we're at a German base, we find several islands in the area, but there's only one that's actually interesting to us. A number of them are either uninhabited or just don't really have much going on. There is the island of Heligoland, or Helgoland as it's also known. This island actually did see a bit of action in World War II. While there are people who are living on this island, the Germans actually did use this island sort of just as a naval base, and it saw an air battle over it as well as a number of bombing raids from the Allies as they would try to take out German ships who were near that island. So this island, now owned by the British, was once owned by the Germans and did have a role in World War II. So it is something that would be on Sledgehammer's radar as they're looking for places to set their World War II Zombies map. This is kind of what clued me into maybe this is the island that we want to look at for our potential DLC 1 setting. So it fits there, and then if you also look at this teaser, we have a little mark over where the island is roughly located. So this leads me to believe that DLC 1 will take place on Heligoland or Helgoland. If we assume that this island is the location of DLC 1, then it only makes sense to do a bit of research into this island to see why Sledgehammer chose to set their zombies map on this island. One of the things you'll first learn is that this island is actually home to the native Frisian people, and it is also known as the Holy Land or the Heiligis Land, and this is because of the Old Norse god Forseti. Forseti is the god of the Frisian people. They reside on Heligoland, and this is her sacred island. So that's something interesting. This is a bit of mythology that they can play with, this idea that it's the Holy Land, or maybe through some changes in terms of the etymology of the island, you go from Heiligis Land to Heligoland to also Helgoland. That could be something that's happened over time, and maybe Sledgehammer would like to play with this Norse god of Forseti for their zombies map. I don't know. It also kind of leads you down a dead end in terms of things to talk about for this map. Why would they focus on this random group of people or this random Norse god? So I'm not really convinced that this is exactly what they're going for, this idea that this island is the Holy Land. As I was doing research into Heligoland, I stumbled across a book written by William George Black in the year 1888 called Heligoland and the Islands of the North Sea. I'm not going to take you guys to the library like I did last time, track down this book, make a video on it, because I don't think it's that particularly important to the zombie storyline like it was, say, the last book. There was, though, one interesting segment in this book that I thought I would bring to you guys. I should mention that the author does acknowledge the idea that the name Heligoland could come from a etymological error where you start with an island known as the Holy Land, thus Heiligis Land, and then it slowly turns into Heligoland over time. He does acknowledge that, but he also presents a different theory on where the island could get its name, and this one is based off of legends. He says, a legend tells us that the name is derived from King Helge, who, in the 16th century, reigned in the island, which was then called Lethra or Hertha. By a series of grim adventures, he becomes the husband of a maid of Saxon called Ursa, by whom he was the father of the famous Rolf Krak, the national hero of Denmark. On discovering the terrible relation in which he really stood to Ursa, that he was both parent and husband, the king killed himself, and thus the island received the name of Helgoland. Ursa afterwards married the king of Sweden. It is a strange tale which links Helgo's land as the birthplace of the Danish Charlemagne with the distant Elsinore, where, under the stones of Hamlet's castle, traditionally he rests, waiting like Barbarossa in Kufeuser Mountain, until the national need calls for the old deliverer. This legend immediately caught my attention when it mentioned Barbarossa in the Kupfhäuser Mountains, who of course is the focal point of the Final Reich. We're looking for Barbarossa's sword. Now, this story doesn't necessarily relate to Barbarossa, but it does suggest the idea that Rolf Krake, who is also known by the other name Holdruf Kraki, I don't even know how to begin to pronounce this Scandinavian or Danish name. Either way, he is supposedly the Danish Charlemagne, one of the great kings of the Danes within their legends, and while he's not necessarily a real person, maybe in this zombie storyline he is, or we can find a legendary artifact of his, and if he is remaining dormant, like say Barbarossa, then maybe this is something that could be attractive to the zombie storyline. So this is where my mind starts running in the direction of my theory that I proposed in my last storyline video, in which this storyline is not about one great king, but many great kings. So the first map is actually about Barbarossa. The second map might actually be about Rolf Krake, the king of the Danes, and then we'd maybe go on to say the Egyptian map, where we then look at Ramses II, and this idea that they're both remaining dormant just seems interesting to me. Now, how would this relate to Helgoland? Well, I guess the island is named after his father, and according to this source, he was born on Helgoland. Now, this is also the only source I can find that would claim he is born on Helgoland. And this is where I'm stumped. This is kind of where I run into brick walls, and I wanted to bring you guys what I had so far in my research, because I definitely think there's enough here to make a claim that it might be related to the zombie storyline and Helgoland, but there isn't just enough sources that I can find yet. As you dig into King Helgo and Rolf's history, it's complicated. There's many different versions of the story. You gotta understand that these are coming from legends that, before they were written down, were passed down through spoken word, and then eventually written down. There's many different versions of them, and these stories are hundreds of years old, much like if you're familiar with the story of Beowulf, which actually does relate to King Helgo and Rolf. They are referenced in those stories. It's complicated. There's a lot going on here, and this is beyond my depth. If there's anybody out there who does actually know more on this, I'd love to get in touch, and maybe you can guide me in a direction. But just according to this source from William George Black, and it's the only source I can find, this claims that he was born on Helgo Island, and he is sleeping much like Frederick Barbarossa, which does seem to pertain to the zombie storyline. This is currently the best link that we'd have, so I'd love to know what you guys think on this, and maybe we can drive this even further. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I hope you all enjoyed this video or found it interesting. If you did, maybe like, subscribe for more. I'm definitely gonna be making more videos on this in the future, so stay tuned. Have a wonderful day, and